I'm Cornell Clayton. I'm the director of the Institute, and I want to welcome you out to our event today. This was complete happenstance that we just so happened to have Chirag's colleague here yesterday, Kate Starbird. So those of you who came and saw her, he's a colleague of Kate's at the University of Washington. We don't normally have Huskies here, especially two in a row, but we are making an exception in this case. We're very fortunate to have with us today Chirag Shah, who is a professor of information and computer science at the University of Washington. He's the founding director of the InfoSeeking Lab and the founding co-director of the Center for Responsibility in AI Systems. His research focuses on building, auditing, and correcting agentic information access systems. Shah is a distinguished member of ACM and a senior member of the IEEE. He has published nearly 200 peer-reviewed articles and authored 8 books, including his new book, which is coming out this spring, Agent Nation: How Autonomous AI is Rewriting the Rules of Society and What We Can Do About It. So join me now in welcoming Chirag Shah to the podium.
Thank you, everybody, for welcoming me here. It's my first time to this campus, and so I feel very privileged, and despite me being Husky. I'm glad Kate was here. You know, she's fantastic, and a lot of what we do is often overlapping and complementary. So what I'm going to talk about here today, and this is Humanities Washington, talk that I'm thankful for the organization also for supporting this. As I was saying before to some folks, that this is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, because normally I work more on the technology side. There's always a human side to that, but today I'm not here to give a technical talk. I'm here to talk more from the human side of AI. Right? And so I might fumble, so bear with me, but I welcome you to challenge me. So it's okay to ask questions, interrupt me. I want this to be interactive, so it's not a lecture. And I'm also still learning. A lot of the things that I'm presenting here, I'm still trying to figure out. And so one of the purposes for giving these talks and stepping out of that comfort zone is so that I can get that opportunity to learn by people questioning me and engaging in some discussions. So I want to start in the 18th century. Trust me, this is not a history lesson. I'll quickly bring you back to 21st century. But 18th century Vienna, it's an amazing time. There's a lot of things happening. This is the late 18th century, around 1770 or so. One of the things, if you were to kind of go around and see what's happening in town, you'll find the Empress Maria Theresa playing chess with this gentleman here, in Turkish robes and turban, and but this is not an ordinary person. It's actually a machine. So this is a mechanical device that plays chess. It's called the Mechanical Turk, right? And it's got all kinds of machinery that moves it. So you sit down and you're playing chess as if you play with the human, and it will move pieces, right? Some amazing, big name celebrities played this because this is magic, right? In the 18th century, this is magic. Nobody has ever seen anything like this, from that empress to other dignitaries, including Napoleon played with this. It toured the whole Europe. It toured actually the U.S. too. Benjamin Franklin, Edgar Allan Poe, a lot of people, and so this was kind of an amazing thing, a show to see. For decades, this went on until in 1820 they revealed that this wasn't some magic, this wasn't some amazing thing. There was actually a person inside who was a chess master who moved the pieces using magnets and levers and things like that, right? For 50 years, this show continued. And people marveled at that until they revealed this, that Mechanical Turk where you would think that this is some intelligent device that has mastered chess and at human level turn out to be actually human in the actual device. Of course, this is not the first or the last time something like this happened. I mean, we've seen Wizard of Oz. There have been many cases where people were led to believe that something amazing is actually happening. Like this automata, that's also from 18th century, who would write poetry or do some drawing, right? Human-looking thing, but a mechanical thing. And this is back in the days when this was in like some computer or software operated, but they were able to construct it in a way that it will create that writing or that drawing in a specific manner. So you couldn't just demand like, hey, write me a new poem, right? It would only do the same thing that it was meant to do. And people knew that, of course, this is fake. This is not a real human, but it's fascinating. These kind of things have fascinated for throughout our humanity. I mean, fast forward like a couple of centuries, and you see this Eliza, which you may have heard about. Is one of the first, chatbots that came out in the 1960s. Of course, this is nothing compared to what we have with Chat GPT and so on. But in the 60s, this was amazing to have a computer, an artificial thing, talking to us in human language. You can have question answer. We've never been able to do something like this with anyone other than humans, right? And let that sink in. Right? I mean, a lot of things we take for granted. Think about it, which other species before, if you look at the whole human history, these kind of things are fairly recent. Right? For many millennia, the only others we can do those kind of conversations were other humans, right? But we've started seeing things like this, things that give us a sense of like maybe they have intelligence, maybe they have even emotional capabilities. And of course, this was a lot of inspiration for people like Alan Turing to think about what would it be if these things keep improving. Would they get to the point where we can't tell the difference between them and real humans? Right? So Turing talked about what's called the imitation game, where if a machine sufficiently intelligent, you put them behind the scene and can mimic human ability to the point where the human on the other side can't tell that they're interacting with a machine. Right? Because it's able to mimic human behavior, personality so well. Of course, this later known to be called the Turing test, and there are different versions of it. But see, today I'm not here to tell you about the technology behind it. I'm here to tell you about the human side of it. Because these stories, whether it's the Mechanical Turk or Eliza, all of these matter because they are reflections of who we are. How we see ourselves, how we aspire to be something else. So today we're going to explore this artificial machines, the AI, and their invasion, if you will, in the human terrorists, things that have been uniquely human, right? That these artificial systems are starting to do those things. So what does it mean? What are the implications for humans? And of course, that's an ongoing discourse. I mean, I'm not here to give you all the answers because I don't have answers, but that's an ongoing discourse. But here's the thing that's a little bit uncomforting for us is in the light of this discussion and this discourse, starting to think, what does it even mean to be human? Right? And so before we begin, I just want to remind that I will have a lot more questions than answers today. So I hope you didn't come here for answers. I would call myself successful if I end up leaving you with more questions than the answers. And these questions, and maybe even some of the answers, may challenge us and make us feel uncomfortable. Some of these things will be uncomfortable to think through or accept. But just know that we are in this together. And there are two sides of this being together. One is when you're feeling uncomfortable about this, or when you're feeling uncertain, or you think that, oh, but I don't know how. Well, trust me, there are others like you who also don't know how to deal with this and who are also feeling uncomfortable. But the other side of being together is, this is not where you say, not my problem. I'm not building the technology. I'm not in the government. I'm not in the big tech. Why should I worry about it? No, you're in this in the same side. You're also together to face the challenges and not feel that somebody else figure it out. So we are all in this together, both on the question side and the answer side. So let me start, and some of the stories that I will tell you today are actually, all the stories are based on real incidents that happened. In some of the cases, I've abstracted out for various reasons, including protecting the identity, but they're all based on things that have happened. And so we begin one story where a mother in Arizona gets a call from her 15-year daughter, and she's crying on the other hand and saying, "Mom, I'm sorry I messed up." And then the mother hears another voice, says, "I got your daughter," and starts threatening. And there are things here that I want to actually say or write, because very traumatizing, especially as a parent. If I were to get something like this, right, where this man is saying that they kidnapped my daughter, and if I don't pay up $1 million, the kind of things that they would do. Right? Now, in reality, the daughter was actually okay, right? But the scammers had cloned her voice using her social media stuff online to create this call, right? And this is not the last time this happened. This was not long ago. I mean, again, 2023. These kind of things have happened multiple times now. And those are the things that we actually know of, right? So technology is definitely very sophisticated. But say that's not the point that I'm trying to make here. The point I'm trying to make here is, think about that mother who got that call and immediately led to believe that that's my daughter. What made that real, right? It wasn't the sound, the obviously the signals were mimicked from the actual authentic voice. But I would argue that it wasn't just that. It wasn't just, hey, there is this signal, there's a voice, and that's what makes it's the context behind it, the relationship that sound represents. And we, the humans, we take this kind of data point. I mean, sorry, I'm a machine learning, AI person, so I think about data points. So when you hear that voice, it's a data point. But immediately as you get that data point, you're associating all the context surrounding that. Right? And that just happens automatically. And because of that, the impact is way more than simply like, oh, I got this data point and I can analyze it. So this mother, she actually later testified in front of Congress, and she was describing what was going through her mind at that time. So even after she learned that her daughter is actually safe and this is fake, she was still shaking. Right? Her anxiety level was still very, very high. So in other words, we are not simply some data processors who like, oh, I got this data. Oh, it's fake. Okay, I'm done with it. No, there's something bigger than just that data. So we are now in the era where artificial systems can do these things so reliably that it creates this perturbance in this context that we live in. And that's where it starts getting into the human territories. So there are 4 territories I want to talk about that are uniquely human, or that's what we believe so far. And we'll go through these and see where AI is making its way in. And that's where I'll bring up questions that may be uncomfortable for us. Because again, it makes us question, like, what is being human then? So let's start with creativity. I mean, this is definitely something that we have accepted, it's a human domain, right? We love our pets, but they're not that creative, right? Those are our closest companions. We've seen some really intelligent other species, from dolphins to, chimpanzees stuff, but there's a limit to, their creativity. So creativity is something that's very, very human. So let me take you to another era. I mean, but actually this is very close to us. In 2022, Colorado State Fair. And there was this competition for, art, like digital art specifically. And judges, came across this amazing art piece, right? Theater the Opera special. It's intricate. It's just spectacular. It's the dreamlike scene of figures in an opera house. Right? Easily wins the first prize. And after that happens, the artist, Jason Allen, discloses that he used AI to create this, a tool called Midjourney. You might have heard about it. And then people get upset. I mean, sure, it was meant to be digital art, but when we think about digital art, you're using computer, maybe you're using Photoshop, you're doing, whatever sketching, things, but you're still doing some sketching. You're using the technology to enhance it or whatever. But Jason Allen, he didn't pick up a paintbrush, not even a digital one. What he was doing is prompting Midjourney. Now, he discloses that he spent 80 hours and hundreds of iterations to get to this result. So he claims that, well, that's my creativity. I had a vision of what I want to create, right? And I directed the tool to do that. So that's art. What do you think?
I personally don't think so because I do a lot of 3D printing on the side, and for me, I have to use CAD and CAM. Well, more specifically, CAD to make my models, and although 80 hours is a lot, I mean, like Leonardo da Vinci, it took him a long time, to paint, the great painting of Mona Lisa. So I'm gonna have to disagree with him and say that like it's not okay because you never picked up a paintbrush. That's the fundamental thing.
So for you, it's not just amount of time. That's not a good enough argument.
No, I agree. Because if you put me in front of a computer with the same AI, I don't think I would know what to tell it to make this image. Therefore, this artist understands something about AI that I don't, and therefore he deserves credit for generating this image.
Is art recognized by the process to get to the art, or is it recognized by the perception in the viewing, in the experience of viewing?
I don't know. You tell me. That's my
I'm just
question.
here for the questions too.
I think that's our question here, right? So when we think about this art, like what is really art, right? We didn't have to address these things before because there was a clear relationship between the artist, the process, and the product. But now we are able to separate those things, right? You can have an artist that has a vision, but somebody else has the process, and then somebody else has managed to produce the outcome. And so you can disassociate these things, something that we didn't have that. So before, when you saw the product, you knew that it's a result of a process that only this kind of talent can produce. Right? And by the way, this has implications in education too. Right? There's a reason why we are struggling to give assignments or grade assignments now, because for a long time, the assumption is if a student writes a great essay, it's only a result of their skills, their talent, the time that they spent, the process that they followed, and that's the only way they could have come to this. So we could use that outcome, that product, as a proxy for their learning, that process, and their skills. So that's no longer the case, right? We all know that. So this is now a challenge for us. I don't have answers, but these are our questions. Let's jump to another territory. Emotional intelligence. Again, this is something, a very human, thing. There are animals who demonstrate emotional responses, but there's always a limit, right? I mean, you would go and talk to a therapist, even if you have a therapeutic, pet. But this is now becoming also another area where AI is jumping in. And this is a fictitious story, but it's based on real stories where Sarah, a college student, talks to an AI therapist. And when she was asked, like, why? She said, well, it doesn't judge. It won't tell my parents, and it won't get tired of me. Right? All the good reasons. So now there are lots of these things happening. Of course, the actual AI doesn't look like this, and this is not real Sarah, right? But we've seen stories of these things happening. And so the question is like, well, if they are receiving real support, does it matter that the thing that's giving that support is not real? But say it's not a simple thing, because currently there is this epidemic that we're living through especially in the Western Hemisphere. The loneliness actually is spreading in other parts of the world too. Just in the US, there are millions of Americans who actually report feeling lonely, right? Vulnerable. And so apps like Replica AI and others are helping them. They're kind of interacting with this as their companion, right? As a therapist, maybe sometimes even emotional or romantic companions. Right? And so, is this okay? Is it harmful? What's harm if they're getting support? Now, again, there's no simple, easy answer, and it's not straightforward. There have been cases, actually, a few months ago, this was a big thing that there were minors who had taken their lives. And there's multiple cases that happened, cases that we actually know of, interacting with chatbots and taking their advice. Right? And so, this is definitely not acceptable. And I wrote about this a few months ago, that while I see that, of course, technology companies need to do something about it, and we need to have guardrails around it, because this, minors, they don't know what these things are capable or not capable, how they should, but I see a deeper problem. I'm asking, why did that 17-year-old had to rely on this kind of support? Because we, the family, the school, the social structure around them failed them. So again, we can criticize technology, and we should, but we also need to understand the deeper issue here, that on one hand, we are failing to support them, and on the other hand, these entities are becoming more and more humanist, right? Human-like, where people start kind of taking that territory that was uniquely human to that. And that's happening in healthcare, that's happening in emotional support system, a lot of those things. So again, we start to question the fundamentals of what is companionship, right? Things that we've just taken for granted so far. Let's talk about meaning making. Again, this is very, very much, human thing, because it requires understanding. So let me talk about philosophy. Here's American philosopher John Searle, and he famously gave this thought experiment of what's called Chinese room. So this is extending Turing's analogy of that or the game, the imitation game. So imagine there is this closed room. Inside it, instead of super capable system, you have a human who doesn't know Chinese, but has all the tools available to translate English to Chinese and Chinese to English. And let's assume that he can do that in real time, in a fraction of a second. So somebody from outside sending an instruction in Chinese is able to get a response back in Chinese. And what happens is this person translates things from Chinese to English, construct the answer in English, translate it back to Chinese, and blurts it out, but has no real understanding of Chinese. He's got the right tools and right skills to use those tools. And so people outside will think that, hey, whoever is inside the room must be a very intelligent Chinese speaker. Right? So Searle asks us, do you accept this? That is that person really capable, intelligent Chinese speaker? If the outcome is good, it's right, do you care that that person actually doesn't understand or speak Chinese without using those tools? Now, Searle then also goes on to talk about, in the context of AI, what he called weak AI and strong AI, where he says that if that entity doesn't actually understand things but can still produce output, that's a form of weak AI. And if, on the other hand, if he actually produces output through true understanding, then it's strong AI. But we won't go there. The point is, what do we care about? Do we care that that entity, whatever is inside, could be human, could be, and most likely, an artificial entity, able to give us the right stuff, but doesn't actually understand it or doesn't feel it? Does it matter? Obviously, in the cases where people are using those chatbots for emotional support, they didn't care. It's not like they didn't know that they were interacting with a non-human entity, but it didn't matter to them because they felt the support to be real. Right? Now, this may be uncomforting to many, because we think that that's a human thing. Like that's like you can't just talk to a non-human thing. But when humans are not available, and this is what is happening in that endemic for a lot of those teenagers, they're not getting enough human support, and so they're going to this. Right? And again, as I said, this happens in education where student uses ChatGPT, and well, I use that, and teachers, well, did you actually understand what you wrote? Students say, well, I understand it now. The AI helped me see the connection. And the question, like, did learning really happen here? Right? Is that enough? Right? But then we need to ask like things that we took for granted, like understanding. How do we define understanding? Because before the relationship was clear, right? That if you produce this, then the only way you were able to produce is you have that understanding. But we no longer can make that assumption, right? And so where really is understanding? Is that in that process? Is that in the output? Is that in the ability to explain the output, right? So, and finally, ethical reasoning. And again, this has been a uniquely human element because it requires, I don't know where the quote comes, wisdom requires a soul. So we've seen things like this where a judge, and actually I talked to a lot of judges and lawyers, and I kind of see how they use AI in court, but this is, of course, becoming common across many, many fields, where people were offended that a judge used ChatGPT for writing a ruling, but judge argued that, well, I used it as a research assistant, and this is an argument that I see many, many other places, including students, right? Where is the boundary between Google and ChatGPT? I mean, I use Google for search, right? I mean, and then I just took that search to ChatGPT, and instead of giving me a list of results, it gave me an answer. I use it as a research assistant. But especially in that case, think about what the judge is delivering, right? And what we expect from them is judicial wisdom. But what is that judicial wisdom? Is it following precedent? Right? That's something that AI can do. Is it applying rules consistently? I mean, many would argue that AI can actually do it better than humans, right? Is it understanding human context? And that's where it gets a little hairy, right? Well, the context, how do you define context, right? Is it just a bunch of data points around you and your activities and stuff? AI can get that and a lot more. Or is it something more than that? So let me give you, again, from the philosophy, the classic, the trolley problem scenario, where there's this trolley coming and there are these 5 people on the track, and it's going to kill those 5 people unless you act and pull the lever that will divert the trolley to this other track, killing 1 person. Would you do it? How many will do it? Okay, how many will not? Indecision is not a choice. Actually, well, yeah, I mean, if you don't take a decision, then you're killing 5 people, but you're watching, So essentially, indecision is a choice here. You're choosing to let 5 people die instead of 1 person.
No.
You wouldn't do that?
You're not, no, it's not, you're not killing them, right? Like, inaction is not a choice.
Well, you could have prevented them from dying.
You could be preventing people from dying right now. You could be out there like being vigilante.
But this is something that's in your hands, literally, right? We're not talking about some hypothetical somewhere else that you're not able. Like, this is right. Like, you have the power.
Right, but the natural course is that 1 person is going to die, right? That 1 person is going to die regardless of whether you're there or not.
No, natural course is 5 people.
Sorry, 5 people will die. But like if you flick the left, okay, then 1
well,
person
it depends if you consider that natural course.
It was the state of affairs before I appeared.
So, okay, so again, you can say, well, it's not my fault, right? Somebody might say, well, of course it's your fault. You could have helped like those 5 people, and it gets even trickier. Imagine if you have this scenario. You have these 5 people who would die unless you throw 1 person off the bridge. Now, those who raise their hand the first time, would you do this?
Not sure. I understand the question.
Some of you are changing. It's the same thing, right? You're killing one person versus five. But now we're thinking differently because say, before you were touching a lever. It's a different feeling to it versus actually pushing off a person. Now you're definitely feeling like you're killing somebody if you didn't feel it before, right? And we're not comfortable making these choices because even though overall you would be saving, like the net gain is 4 lives, right? But we are still hesitant to do that. Now, this is something that again I've learned from philosophers. This is the moral dilemma thing that we can talk about and see how people make choices or don't make choices. But it's actually becoming reality in cases. So let's think about self-driving car, right? So you can design the self-driving car. So in case of accident, aim for the minimizing total harm, and that could mean if I'm the driver or passenger hurting me, because that's the only way you could avoid hurting a lot more people. So imagine there are 5 people this car is gonna kill versus me, 1 person, right? So that's a utilitarianism. Or say, well, I'm the most important person, save me, right? All right, so let's see. How many will go with the first one, utilitarianism? So you're okay getting yourself killed in case the car can save 2 people or more. Okay, how many will go with the second one? See how uncomforting this is, how uncomfortable. And again, if you think this is, and there could be something in between, but this is no longer a philosophical question because there was a survey done of more than 400 people asking the same question. What I'm asking you, and the answers they got were pretty much what we are getting, like the distribution, like half and half or so. But generally speaking, overwhelming support for like some kind of a moral algorithm. However you define moral, right? Chances are mostly like some utilitarianism or some combination. But now they said, okay, we got this car. You're gonna buy it, and you tell us how we should program it. You're gonna buy this, you're gonna use it. That's a different thing, right? Well, many didn't want their car to follow the egoism thing, right? Because we care about the overall, but also they didn't want to do the utilitarianism. What they wanted other cars to be altruistic, but they wanted their car to keep them safe. You see, so this is a real scenario now. This is actually happening because we're starting to get, or we're at the edge of getting those kind of self-driving cars. The question is, so it's not the question of can AI be moral or can AI be ethical? The question is, whose ethics should it follow? Because it's not like we have somehow figured out the ethic code. And now it's just a question of how do we program it into this, self-driving car. We disagree on those ethical, codes, and yet we're going to use the same system. Now, can you imagine if, my philosophy is one model, and so I have my car following that model, and your philosophy is different? How will that work? So these are no longer just some hypothetical questions. This is where we are. We are facing these challenges. Self-driving cars, I often say that it's not a technology challenge. Actually, in many cases, it's been shown, and so there's empirical evidence that the artificial or the self-driving cars are better drivers than human drivers, overall, safety-wise. And yet, we don't see it everywhere, right? And there are a number of reasons. One of them is this, like we don't have a common understanding of ethical code. The other reason is when it comes to humans, we have legal and social framework for what to do when things go wrong. When there's an accident, we know who to sue, how to support, what insurance, and so on. When a self-driving car gets into the accident, we don't have that. Who's to blame? Right? Who's responsible? Who's accountable? So it's an uncomfortable feeling that we are at. So to start summarizing where we are, because again, it seems like we're nowhere. In a way, yes. So what remains unique, because it seems AI can do all kinds of things. So what is now really uniquely human? So let's just say, so AI, so individual abilities may not be just the uniquely human, because AI can do pretty much all of them, as we have seen, right? There's a reason the Turing test that, when Turing proposed, it has not been a valid test for intelligence for a long time now, because it's very easy to pass that test. Because all that test called for is being able to fool a human. One of my first articles in the space of LLM, which I wrote with my colleague at UW, Emily Bender, was in 2021. So this is way before ChatGPT and everything. And we were criticizing how the language models that especially Google was demonstrating, one of the complaints we had is how easily people can be duped into believing that they're interacting with real human. And there is a harm to that. Now, when we did that, we got all kinds of reception. Some people loved it, some people hated it, especially Google. And so the backlash we got is like, oh no, you guys are exaggerating this. Like, clearly this is an artificial system. People know that they're interacting with the artificial system. We don't have any concern. Well, guess what happened within a few months of that? There was a Google engineer called Lemoyne who was actually involved in building that chatbot at Google. At that time, it was called Lambda. He fell for it. He thought it had gone sentient, right? And there was this whole case that happened where he declared that this Lambda model has actually awareness, actually has consciousness. And he had this chat transcript in which this model says, I fear of dying. I have this existential, feelings and things like that. And this was a proof that it has actually become sentient. And so it was a very ironic twist that we thought that something like this will happen to an average user who wouldn't know that this is an artificial system. It happened to Google's own engineer who was designing this damn thing. That engineer was then fired. Google say, well, no, it hasn't gone sentient. But that was 2022. We've come a long way since then. So clearly there are many areas where AI has been doing better and just as equal as humans in terms of capabilities, and certainly being able to pass the Turing test to fool somebody, right? But maybe there is something deeper about being human that AI doesn't really capture, not just yet. And I think it's important, it's time that we start thinking about it. Like I would say the integration of these capabilities, right? Now, of course, there's a big push of developing AGI, right? The artificial general intelligence. And the goal of general intelligence is not just the other thing that we have is artificial narrow intelligence, where an AI is expert at doing one thing, like playing chess or mimicking, human interaction, but they can't do everything, or they can't do the overall thing that only humans can do. So maybe this won't be there for too long, if we were to believe the AGI hype. There's something about continuity of our experiences, right? There's something about, we are not just a set of data points, but we've walked a line, we've gone through curves, we've gone back and forth. The things that we have, it's very unique to us, right? And in fact, it's very unique to every individual, because every individual in this room, on this planet, has gone through different lines and different curves. What it's like to be me, what it's like to be us, that's our shared experience. That's also uniquely human, I would argue. And finally, this vulnerability, mortality, right? That gives some weight, that drives our decision making, that drives that moral judgment, things that an artificial system doesn't have, right? Even though it's good at pretending to have that, like what happened with that Google engineer, right? It still doesn't have. So the AI still can learn from that content, just from the data. So here's the context, and again, this is also based on real research, where trying to figure out, like in agriculture, domain, why AI is not able to do as well, even though it has ton of data? Well, because it doesn't have the embodied knowledge. And when you go and talk to the farmers, and the studies have done, they will tell you, farmers, that they don't just sit in the office and just get all the data and that's what they're doing. They're not data analysts. They actually walk the field. And there's something about walking, and we were talking about how important it is to go in person. I could have given this talk online. It would not be the same as being here, being in the same room, seeing your faces, interacting with you in person. There's no substitution for it, right? And that's something that still, AI is not able to do. Now, there are push for their works, especially, Jan LeCun, who left Meta, and he's been pushing for what's called world models, right? Because he and others have been arguing that you can't just have language models, you can't just have vision models, right? Because that's similar to like just getting all the data and sitting in your office and never going out to the farm. Right? You need to actually be out there, feel the world. That's how humans learn. And so there are works that takes the AI out to do that, but we're not there yet. So what I would argue that a lot of these things are going to continue happening. The technology will keep advancing. There's a lot of there's a technology element of it. There's a business element. There's social political element. But one thing is clear: there's enough incentive there to keep pushing that. People will keep adapting or resisting. I mean, this is going to continue. What I would argue for is this kind of a conscious co-evolution. Right? So not human versus AI, but humans with AI. It's sort of like we brought in this new species here with us. We've invented this species, but it's here. Toothpaste is like, paste is out of toothpaste. We can't put it back. And so now the question is like, how do we evolve with it? And that means not just the technology keeps changing, but we're also going to keep changing, right? But here's the thing: we get to define this relation. We still have that power, right? And so the choices we can see, or I see, is there are elements of human experience that we want to preserve. There are elements that we want to enhance. Right? It's like, hey, we can have this AI augment what we do, and that would be good. And there are elements where we see this kind of more embodied AI thing, integration, right? And so then, of course, the question is, well, which parts we want to preserve? Like don't have AI touch this, right? Or which part we want to enhance and so on. But again, we can keep talking about it. And often, in my experience, we end up being more of on the technology side, because we sooner or later we start thinking about what is possible through technology and what we can do and so on. But I really want us to be away from that narrative. And really, before we get to answering those questions, really think about what kind of humans we want to be, right? Because normally, and I actually work in this field, I'm doing things, in agentic AI, where we build these agents so we can delegate our responsibilities to these agents so that, we can have more time, we can have, more productivity and so on. But I don't think it's that simple. We need to really think about what capabilities we want to retain and we want to delegate. So one example I give you, pretty much every morning, not today, but most mornings, I go drop off my kids at the bus stop, and then I pick them up at the end of the day. This is like, one could argue, well, that's a mechanical task that somebody could do it. I can delegate, right? I mean, it takes up like 15 minutes of my time in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon. I could be saving. But say for me, it's an important part of my day. Because those 15 minutes that I spend with my kids, we're talking about, so what are you looking for today? Like, what's going on in your school? You got that homework done, and things like that, and they're telling me about something happening in school. It's my it's my opportunity to connect with my kids and feel like, I'm a parent, and just similarly, when I pick them up, right? So it's not so much of like, can I delegate this task? Sure. Soon we will have some robots or self-driving cars that can do this, but I don't want to. Personally, I don't want to, because to me, it's not just about saving time there. It's my important connection to feeling like, yes, it makes my day. But say everybody needs to make this decision on their own. So it's not as simple as, can the technology do this? I think before we answer that question, it's like, what kind of human we want to be. So as you go on this journey, and I'm going to start wrapping this up just so we have hopefully a little bit of time for discussion. Again, I'll leave you with more questions, right? So what do you, just like for me, that time with my kids, even though it takes up time from my day and it could be easily saved, it's an experience that's important to me. But you have to think about what are those experiences that are important to you, right? What are you willing to outsource? You know, again, we've already seen emotional connections, creativity, you know, those things are already possible. The thing is, I want you to make a choice rather than, you know, can technology do it? Right? I feel my responsibility to think about like, what would it be? What kind of world I'm leaving with I mean, this is a responsibility for every generation, right? But part of that responsibility now also to think about like, what kind of humans I want them to be. I have responsibility in my students, right? When they say, well, what's wrong with using ChatGPT to write my paper, right? I need to think about, and this actually really came up to me back in like 22 or 23, when one of my PhD students, well, you know, is it okay if I do my lit review section using ChatGPT? And I had to think about like, I want to say no, but why no? Right? The instinct, the teacher instinct was like, no, that's a bad idea. Don't do it. Well, why? Right? I mean, we let kids use calculators. No, isn't that the same kind of thing? We let them use Grammarly. Like, where do we draw the line and why there? Right? And so these things we need to really start thinking about for our kids, our students. I mean, here's a funny question, actually. Imagine all like, you know, this agentic AI stuff, you know, the big hype that's currently going on. And actually, I would disclose that I'm part of that, like not the hype part, but, you know, doing, you know, agentic AI stuff. If we are really successful, we can just delegate all these things to AI. We never have to struggle again. Is that what we really want? I mean, my personal argument is struggle is part of being human. So as much as we are looking to avoid struggles or, you know, reduce our struggle, we are actually compromising a lot more. But again, we need to think about this in a way that we haven't so far. So think about what makes life meaningful. I want to wrap up by bringing you back to that mechanical Turk. So when this happened, you know, when this was revealed in 1820, after 50 years of this being out there, you can imagine what people felt. It's like, really? This is what, you know, I thought it was a magic, right? Some people felt they're deceived. Others felt relief. It's like, oh, thank God, you know, like that some artificial thing hasn't like taken over, like, you know, because humans are still the you know, at the top of the pyramid kind of thing. So there were mixed feelings. But the fascination continued. In some respect, once the secret was revealed, more people got more fascinated by this, right? Because one of the things this shows is the human ingenuity, right? This is something that we have done from the days, you know, this to you know, Tesla and Edison also did a lot of these things, you know, Wizard of Oz. There are a lot of, you know, where people are made to believe something exists, and that brought them together. That inspired them. Think about all the sci-fi things, how much it has inspired real science. So in some respect, this is actually an amazing thing that humans are capable of doing, and it's a positive. So this is a positive spin on it. Now, ironically, you know, 2 centuries later, Amazon has a service called Amazon Mechanical Turk, right? Which is actually based on this idea that you want to build like AI systems, and AI system is not capable enough, so you use humans to do that task, and then teach AI how to do that task, right? So that's sort of the general idea, but you're able to do crowdsourcing. So if you're developing object recognition AI from some pictures, AI, well, now AI is pretty good, but there was time it wasn't, so you use actual humans, just like what happened with the Mechanical Turk. You know, the machine wasn't able to really do the chess, so you put the actual human in it. It never learned, the machine never learned, so that's one difference. Here now, we're collecting the data, training the AI, and the AI learns. But we've come full circle, right? And so I think it's time we, again, think about like, where do we want to go with this? It was clear what was happening there, why it was being done. It's less clear here. And if this is not interesting enough, think about a scary story where some of these agents, artificial agents that are created, they have to do humanistic tasks. They're asked to do humanistic tasks, but many websites, they don't want these agents to come and do things on behalf of human. So they will have CAPTCHAs, right? We've all used CAPTCHAs, right? And this is something that many of them can solve. You need a real human. So to test that you're a real human, this CAPTCHA is thrown. Well, some of these agents, what they start figuring out is they can use Mechanical Turk to get real humans to solve CAPTCHAs for them. And you basically pay them few pennies, right? So these artificial agents that were given humanistic tasks couldn't pass for human for that part. They learn how to bring in the humans to do just that CAPTCHA thing so they can continue pretending to be human. How convoluted is that? But that's where we are. So I'm gonna leave some time for hopefully some discussions. I know it's almost 1 o'clock and some of you have to leave, so I understand that. Just a shameless self-promotion. I'm writing about, I've written about it. The book is coming out hopefully sometime this spring called Agent Nation. But I welcome your thoughts, questions, and interaction. Thank you so much.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 very quick questions.
If you need to leave, you can leave. Thank you, PD on Politics.
Absolutely love your presentation. I taught a graduate class for 35 years where I told people my job is to make you more confused at a higher level when you get out of here.
I succeeded.
It seems to me there are 2 real, of all the dilemmas that you beautifully presented here, there's 2 that are maybe bigger than the rest. One is who gets to decide how to use this stuff. That's a pretty obvious one. But the other one is the nature of human consciousness. I mean, there's a whole school of thought out there that suggests that human consciousness does not originate in this thing we call our brain, but the brain is simply a filter for consciousness that comes to the brain from other places. We've never resolved that one. Psychologists have never resolved that one. And now AI is sort of bringing that dilemma back into relief again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there are different schools of thoughts on this, and I've been actually in not all of them, but multiple of them at different times in my career. So one school of thought is, well, in order to really truly design an artificial system that mimics human, which is the original goal of AI, we need to understand human consciousness, and then we need to figure out how to codify it. But often there are challenges because we have never succeeded in getting to that. So the other school of thought said, well, screw that. Who cares if we don't understand? As long as, and that's why I gave the example of John Searle's, Chinese room. As long as we can get things done, who cares that we don't really, this artificial system doesn't really have the consciousness or the feeling or the moral thinking, right? So there's artificial narrow intelligence, artificial general intelligence. There's artificial capability or capable intelligence. The ACI argues that forget about intelligence at all, right? Focus on capabilities. Is the system able to do some tasks that you agree? Don't question if it has consciousness or not. So again, I think it's up to us to decide, is consciousness or having emotional intelligence or anything like that requirement? Could we accept this as long as it's good at pretending human, being human?
So let me do this, since so many of us have to get off to class. Let me encourage you, if you have questions, to stick around after, and Chirag will stick around, I'm sure, for a few minutes and
Yes.
answer some questions. But join me now in thanking him for a great.
Thank you.